Everyone joining us today to hear about the OpenFn team. As some of you may know, this is a new series that we're hosting at Digital Square, the Global Good Open Mic webinar series that kicked off with Acros Reveal implementation last month and now is being followed by OpenFn implementation LMICs. This new series is meant to give our global goods a chance to speak to a broader community about the work that they're doing, with a large focus on community dialogue, I suppose is the right way to say it, with a lot of open Q&A and a very engaging means of discussing what do our global goods do and looking at some interesting case studies that way. I'm going to be passing off to Linda Taylor, who's going to introduce our speakers and give a little bit of housekeeping before jumping into our presentation today. So over to you, Linda.
Okay, great. Thank you, Maria. So housekeeping, as always, please make sure that you keep your mics muted until we have our Q&A session at the end. And then we really would like you to unmute and to give us your thoughts. We will, of course, be sharing the recording and the slides after this webinar. And feel free to drop comments or questions in the chat as we go so that we can monitor them. But we will hold those until the Q&A portion at the end. So in introducing our speakers today, I'm just going to give you the brief Cliff Notes version of the bios, because otherwise it's going to take up at least half of our allotted time, because suffice to say, we have some very well qualified and very highly experienced speakers with us today. So first of all, we're going to hear from Taylor Downs. So Taylor is the CEO of OpenFn, which he founded in 2014. Before that, he co-founded and served as CEO of Vera Solutions, and he's lived and worked in over a dozen countries in Africa, so consulting on things such as intervention design, training, M&E, and so on. So as just one example amongst some of the many hats that he wears, he serves as advisor to the Technical Committee of GovStack, which is aimed at accelerating digital transformation of government services through the adoption of digital public goods. We're also going to be hearing from Alexa Krols, who oversees implementations at OpenFn, where she works very closely with strategic partners and implementers to help define business requirements and design and implement workflow automation solutions. So all really ultimately aimed at ensuring long-term impact of those OpenFn implementations. So Alexa has a lot of direct experience with implementing a wide range of technologies. We are also joined by Robert McTavish. So Robert is a children's rights advocate and an international development professional. He's the co-founder of Responsible Data for Children. So that's a new initiative in partnership with the GovLab at NYU. And he currently works at UNICEF HQ in New York, leading Primero, an open source information management application used to facilitate social services for vulnerable populations. So Primero is a digital public good being used at scale by over 100 organizations across 60 different countries. Robert is a product manager, business analyst, and certified Scrum product owner. And lastly, but certainly not least, we also are joined today by Nino, who is a pioneering technologist with over 15 years of cybersecurity experience. He has recently joined us here at Digital Square as technical security architect, and he brings to us his broad executive level expertise in cybersecurity, IT, computer forensics, network programming, and telecommunications. So Nino is a cybersecurity consultant, trainer, ethical hacker, security assessor and pen tester, and he also contributes to the Open Web Application Security Project, which is a non-profit foundation that works to improve software security. So I rattled through that very quickly because I know we have a lot to tell you. So I'm going to hand over now to Taylor, who's going to kick us off. Over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Linda. Is my audio okay for everyone? Just quick. Okay, brilliant. Amazing. So The plan for today, you heard Linda introduce the folks that we have up on the panel right now. It's a really, really fantastic group because we have people involved in the implementation of OpenFn, in the design, implementation, and deployment of Primero with the ministry in Thailand. And we have a security expert. And when we were asked by the Digital Square team to do today's webinar, we were thinking about how we could tie in these considerations that are really important for our global goods community around security and scale when working with governments. So the concept that we're going to try out today is to sort of take you through a bit of the process, a bit of the thought process and the actual implementation process for a OpenFn Primero Thai Ministry Health Record System project. And as we go, we'll be stopping off along the way, calling out to Alexa and to Robert and to Nino to sort of get their insight on what the various actors in this implementation project were thinking about when they were taking certain steps, and what considerations they're still making as they think about scaling up their work with Primero and with OpenFn and other various government systems that they connect to. Yeah, so first, we'd love to hear a little bit more about Primero. Robert, as you heard, is in charge of this child protection technology that UNICEF is now using at scale in 60 plus countries. And Rob, I was hoping you could talk a little bit about Primero. Give us a bit of background, because it's big in the child protection space, but a lot of the folks here are specifically in the health space. That's number one. And then two, you explained to me maybe 3 years ago that child protection work requires partnership. And partnership goes across different organizations, different ministries, different agencies, and different systems. This is sort of how you sold me on, hey, let's make a Primero OpenFN adapter. So I'd love to hear both about those things. Can you give us an intro to Primero, and then can you talk about what this sort of child protection requiring cross-cutting workflows, what that's all about?
Yeah, that sounds good. Let me just clarify. I think you sold me. Just to be clear,
okay.
if I remember correctly, maybe it was you that sold me. But I feel very honored to be invited. This is my first time sort of engaging with this group. As Taylor said, I work in a space called child protection. We might call it a sector. Sometimes it sort of overlaps with other sectors like social welfare. We work with gender-based violence. But let me start by saying what child protection is. I'm a child protection specialist by trade before I ever got involved in product management. And child protection is really preventing and responding to exploitation, violence, neglect. These are things that are incredibly common across the world. They have an enormous impact on human development across the world. And UNICEF and its partners in this space work to support governments to improve their programs for the most vulnerable children in their populations. These children can be affected by conflict. These children can be displaced. They can be separated from their families. They can be in harmful labor situations. They can be without parental care. So these are incredibly vulnerable individuals, and they don't need a single intervention or a single point of support to get them through the situation they're in, to address these vulnerabilities. This is to Taylor's point about the partnership. So we do like to say Primero is a partnership. Really, what we do is largely about trust. So the idea that any single organization can meet all of the needs of a group of vulnerable children or an individual child, it's just not realistic. So what child protection professionals do, and in the West, we kind of associate this more with the notion of social worker. They almost act as an agent on behalf of that individual child. And they do an intervention and assessment with that child. That child might have come into their care, or they may have become aware of this individual because of any number of reasons, but then the child is assessed, a type of plan is created for them that might have multiple interventions involving different organizations. This is called case management. And in my space, what this involves, the biggest challenge really is getting many different organizations to all agree to work in the same place, to treat every individual child as an individual, as its own case, and not to have these same individuals have to re-register in multiple systems in order to access this comprehensive type of care. So that's the thing behind all of this. And you can just imagine that, for example, a child who's in a vulnerable situation, they might need to be placed in foster care, but they also might need an education intervention. They might need a vaccination. They might need any number of different sectoral interventions. And this is where Primero sort of acts as the hub for all of these folks. And this is where a product like OpenFn becomes really important for us. Did I answer both your questions, Taylor?
Yeah, I think that's spot on. It's a good segue. So if Primero is needing to make referrals to some other agency, some other system, if Primero needs to pull in information from some other database, the question is really sort of, how can this digital public good provider and this implementer, how can they automate these cross-partner workflows in a secure, stable, and scalable way? And before we get into how they did it, the quick background on OpenFn, I know a lot of you folks have heard of OpenFn before, but we're a workflow automation platform. And we find these partner orgs that have particular business processes or particular workflows that need to take place, and we automate them. We do about 8 million workflow runs per year, handling 40, 50 million records, and we're in use in more than 40 countries. What I want to focus on, though, is this secure, stable, scalable thing. So internally at OpenFn, we refer to this as S3, and the question and sort of the reason that we walk through this secure, stable, scalable thing in all the design decisions we make and all the implementation decisions we make, the question is like, why does secure come first? Why is that such a priority at OpenFn and frankly, like around the whole global goods community? So for this project, and thanks to a security audit that was carried out by the UNICEF, we've been dedicated a class 1 system by UNICEF. And Rob can probably correct me on all the exact details and implications here, but this was a little scary when I first saw this. It effectively means that OpenFn is used to connect to the most critical or the most sensitive data, and is used to carry out, I believe it's called business critical processes. So there are things that the actual child protection intervention relies on OpenFn to carry out. And Rob was mentioning before, like case referral from one provider to another. So we're nothing if we're not secure. And we can think about making child protection better and stronger and scaling it up later. First things first, we have to make sure we're secure. So class 1 system connecting with sensitive endpoints. Rob, what was the MOPH in Thailand actually trying to deliver with this workflow? Like what was the workflow that we wanted to have happen in a secure, stable, and scalable way?
Great. So I'll just start by saying this is relatively new to us as well. We don't generally engage directly with the Ministry of Public Health. We are more often working with the Ministry of Social Welfare or a MOLSA or but in this case, the Ministry of Public Health called out the need for having a mechanism to refer cases that have come into the health system with child protection actors. Now you can imagine why a healthcare professional would want to refer a specific child in their care to a caseworker. They've had some type of an injury that's suspicious or that meets an eligibility criteria, or this same child has come into their care multiple times for injuries, and it sort of sets off a flag. So that's the sort of the first flow, is that for a relatively small group of children that are in a hospital situation or in a clinical situation, being referred to essentially a social worker who's going to dig in a little bit and assess their home life, and if they're surviving violence, etc., and sort of get that work underway. There is a visionary component to this that's also kind of, pretty new and fascinating for us in child protection, and that's that the Ministry of Public Health decision maker behind this also saw the need to connect a system of national survey data with the child protection system. So knowing that the children that were getting referred from the hospital to the social welfare system normally fell into a sort of criteria, they've had a sort of profile for them. They wanted to be proactive, which is fascinating,
Sure.
and really prevent this kind of thing from happening. This is the other component that's feeding back into Primero, and it's a sort of targeting system at a national scale.
Okay. I can see how that's like a newer thing and really exciting, but also a pretty daunting challenge to undertake. Okay, so this makes sense to me thus far. Maybe the next question would be an Alexa question. So you worked really closely with some of the UNICEF Thailand and UNICEF regional folks who were actually implementing OpenFn. We've said this a ton at Digital Square. Securely built global goods are not secure if they're implemented insecurely. I mangled that a little bit, but how does UNICEF prepare? The team that you work with, how do they prepare to actually implement OpenFn in a secure way?
So usually with these types of implementations, just like with Thailand, there's some sort of concept of a workflow or this problem that we're trying to solve with OpenFn. There's this need for interoperability, whether it's automating this process like case referral exchange, or even data exchange with that Child Shield information. We were feeding data from Primero into Child Shield. There was machine learning running there to then generate risk profiles and then kind of predict the risk of children and then send that back to Primero. But even before we got to dug into those workflows, we're already talking about 3 different systems. At the ministry alone, multiple different teams, multiple different people. We're working with, UNICEF, we're working with in-country office people. So there's a lot of moving parts. And in our experience, what we've tried to do is really at the very, very early stage of like, okay, we want to automate a workflow. We want interoperability, come up with that work plan very early on and share that with everyone involved, because I think this project kicked off maybe a year later even than was hoped, because of just how much coordination needs to happen, particularly if we want to do this securely and ensure that everyone knows what exactly they're getting into and what they need to prepare on their side. So generally at OpenFn, we've done dozens of implementations over the years and have developed these checklists that we then customize with the UNICEF team to kind of come up with a standard work plan and list of items that we would need from all different parties. So whether you're a system administrator or you're a DevOps person, or if you're the business analyst who has to inform the workflow, you get that kind of view of what's going to be needed throughout this project. So that way you can start to prepare on your side and make sure you have what you need, because a lot of times there's a lot of program alignment, legal alignment, compliance alignment,
sure.
and
these are like the data
piece.
sharing agreements and things like this.
Exactly. So generally, like, you can check it out on docs at openfn.org. We're slowly trying to open source more of our implementation process and just kind of show what some of these standard checklists look like. But with Thailand in particular, we knew that they were interested in local deployment. So I'm hoping Rob can speak to this later. But they already had Primero deployed locally on MOPH managed servers. And they also had an API that connected to their entire HIS data set that they wanted to then, feed into Primero and back around. So there was this question of, okay, well, you have two systems already running on MOPH servers. Does it make sense for OpenFunction to also be running on MOPH servers? And does it make sense at this stage? So the first step in these engagements is really just to understand, what went into that decision making for, why have it on local servers? What are the desires there? What are the requirements? What are the country specific data security considerations we consider? What data sharing agreements we have in place? And the output of this type of discovery and requirements gathering exercise, which usually involves, legal folks, programs folks, is kind of documenting what are those points of access for those different systems, who needs to access, and truly like where does data sit at rest versus where does it maybe need to be processed and transferred, but not stored.
Sure.
And from there, we can kind of start to align up, what is the solution here? What are the security requirements we need to consider throughout? And then once we've defined those security checklist items, we can get to the workflow bit, which is the exciting point for people that are into the programs or the business side of things, actually figuring out, how do we get this information from system A to system B? But throughout this process, we're constantly coming back to that checklist because there's so many things that you have to consider while you're implementing these connections between different systems to ensure that it's secure every single step of the way. So we come back to this checklist after design, after the initial setup, after testing, before go live. And by having that same thing again and again, it really allowed us to maintain that audit that we're sticking true to those original requirements. So yeah, check out docs if y'all are ever working on integration projects or workflow automation projects, whether or not using OpenFunction. There's some materials that we actually developed with support from Digital Square not too long ago that hopefully might be helpful for those types of implementations.
That's fantastic, and I know we will get to sort of the local versus cloud and even the hybrid model considerations. So this is maybe a nice time to bring Nino in. Right now, Thailand is using this interesting mixed model with Primero that we'll hear about later, but they started on OpenFn as a SaaS. And OpenFn SaaS, we offer it right now in US and Swiss servers, but they chose SaaS because it was sort of the easiest way to do things securely at the outset. They're thinking about local deployment later, but can we ask, how do global goods generally think about building their software and deploying their software securely? Is there sort of a framework or a posture that these global goods should be taking as they're developing their software and thinking about how they host it, how they deploy it?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. And I do apologize that my cam is not on due to some post-ops. It is a very good question because here it comes to relying on a trust based on a platform that we are using. Let's just clarify something that everybody hopefully will be on the same page. In digital platforms nowadays, we have three types of softwares. We have open source softwares, we have free softwares, but they are not open source. You get the free application, but you can't really see what the software does. And you have the commercial version of a software, which basically you go and pay for it, and they will not share the sources with you. In case of most global goods that we are seeing out there, thanks God that the software is free and it is open source. And what exactly that will entail, when I look at it as a cybersecurity point of view, it will become so crucial because here, when I see the source, I really don't have to go and reverse engineer to see what an application does. Although it is clear, Rob, the application might do something, but it could also do something hidden behind the user scene. So your question is, how can we tell? How can we be absolutely sure, for example, OpenFn is following some frameworks that here will tell me or give me an assurance that actually they are doing a great job when it comes to cybersecurity? by law, so it's not a law, but somehow it is back of our head. It is an 8 principle for secure deployment and development. We try to apply and we try to force that everybody will go and at least pay some attention here. Although there are some concerns, and I will go through each of those, and hopefully it will make a little bit more sense when we talk about 8 principles of secure deployment and development. Now, it says security deployment is everyone's concerns, but it is not everybody's responsibility. This is a very big statement to say. Now, I know in your head you might say, "Oh, we are all responsible for security," but believe it or not, that should not be. You shouldn't bear that responsibility to everybody inside an organization. That responsibility comes from all the way top management to your cybersecurity team that will apply with guidelines and policies, and it will lay out for everybody else to follow. Your security has to be up to date. The knowledge, there is no ifs there, there is no buts there. You can't just say, well, I don't have time, or our team is so busy with writing code that we can't even look at it to see what is going on. My best recommendation to remain on top of the game, which is sort of a little bit hard to do that because we all have many responsibilities in our day-to-day tasks, is go and check everywhere from darknet to deepnet to your normal average internet to find out, to see what are the current threads and current trends that are going on.
Right. What are the discussions that are coming up?
Indeed, because I mean, if you're not aware of something, maybe everybody publicly knows about it. Just because you are not aware of that vulnerability, it doesn't mean it is not there. Make sure that you are producing a clean and maintainable code. A code that has a lot of info in it becomes an issue. For example, if it is a lot of comments or a lot of gibberish that is going on inside a code, that could also give you some hint when you are trying to attack such an environment. Make sure that your development environment is safe and secure. Whether it is on-prem, whether it is over clouds, that doesn't really make any difference here when we are trying to protect our coding environment. Physically, for example, environment will be isolated. You have certain individuals who will come and play with these computers where the codes are written. And even if it is remote, you go through proper VPN communication with IP security. You also make sure that you protect your code repository, that tomorrow somebody internal or external will not come and modify your code. How would we do that? Very simple. I mean, if your code is all digitally signed, if it has digital signatures added to it, then it is impossible. If the encryptions are not compromised, somebody will not be able to change that. Make sure that in step 6 of this principle, securing the build and deployment pipelines. Continuously test your security. I know it's going to be expensive, but at least if you have done that in the first day of your development, when you designed your tool, when security was part of that, it becomes a habit. Everybody will follow this. And also make sure that you are planning for security flows, where it could be that something gonna go wrong, how massive that will be. Would it bring the whole entire network down? Would it compromise the whole entirety of data, and so on and so forth? This is where we have to really plan for worse and hope for the best. Now, how do we know if a global good has followed all of that and they have basically told us, well, they are doing a good job when it comes to security? We can rely on what they post. We can often rely on system and organization control reports, as short, aka SOC. SOC 2 report is often you could ask for it. It becomes very comprehensive. I know they are not obligated, most of global goods, that they have to have a SOC 2 type of report, but at least if you check their website, for example, OpenFn, I go to their documentation, it tells me what they have done, where they have discovered a vulnerability, and that will give me an assurance that I can actually rely on this system. So I hope that will answer your question regarding the security.
This is spectacular. We're going to need to come back to more of this, I think.
Sure.
But number 8 in particular jumped out. One of the most important things to do, I know we've talked about this before, is basically ensure you have that whole process to handle a breach and process to handle a vulnerability detection laid out. Right. The last thing you want is to not have already planned out exactly what will kick into action when something does come up.
Indeed.
Yeah. Okay. So, right. So the Thailand MOPH, they're not worried about building and deploying OpenFn right now. They're starting on the SaaS so they can focus on the security of their workflows rather than the security of the infrastructure. But they're considering a local deployment later. And Rob, right now, they're using Primero's hybrid model, which has a combination of sort of a cloud service, a maintenance and security service from Primero's DevOps team, and local infrastructure. I think that's fascinating. And I know from a security perspective, it's really interesting as well, because it seems like they're sort of getting some of the benefits of having another group worry about security for them, but they also have everything running on their own MOPH servers when it comes to Primero. Have I got that right? And could you talk a little bit more about the hybrid model?
Yeah, it's a new one, and I need to, of course, make sure attribution is correct here. Pavel Nautovsky from Coin is on the call with us today, and this is he's the architect of this solution. But being at the behest of governments, and our mandate is there to support duty bearers to deliver on their duty to their populations, we often get sort of stuck in these initial conversations around how the application is deployed, where it's hosted, and we bump up a lot against regulatory frameworks and different laws in countries. So in this particular model, the hybrid part of it is, we're trying to be able to offer a high quality service with very good standards. We're always thinking about child rights as the priority, but we understand that some places you're not going to be able to use a Primero SaaS, and we host production and demo environments in Microsoft Azure. So our hybrid model is essentially hosting that demo environment, which is the sandbox that we need for training, for testing new features as they're released, for doing these configurations, because from one place to another, Primero is completely different. And promoting those configurations from a sandbox environment to the production environment. That's our normal deployment. In the case of Thailand, we have supported the Ministry of Public Health to deploy production on-prem. So they have gone through a pretty lengthy process. Our technology partner is very involved in that. We've developed lots of documentation, checklists, and different capacity building approaches for this. But essentially what we've done is we've created a new tier of services that involves us hosting a demo environment for them hosting production, and us sort of creating a bridge between them using a product called Ansible. So they're connected to the SaaS, but they have their data sovereignty and regulatory issues addressed there. That presents a whole new set of challenges and problems, but it's a very exciting part of the work now, and increasing demand like crazy. We see more and more requests for this all the time.
It's super exciting, and if I'm getting this right, it's effectively they are running on their own servers, but via your DevOps tooling in Ansible, you're able to push patches down, and you're able to make sure that their software is up to date with the Primero SaaS offering, and that I can understand why that's attractive for MOPH Thailand.
Yeah, they're always running the latest, greatest, but we have to, there's a lot of tooling that we have to improve upon to make this like really an end-to-end offering.
Cool. So they're planning to shift. MOPH Thailand is running on the OpenFn SaaS right now. It's the V1 of OpenFn. It's not on Lightning, but they're planning to shift to Lightning when that comes out next year. And they're considering local deployment. So first, really quick on Lightning, probably most folks on this call haven't actually interacted with it yet because it's still in alpha right now. But it's the next version of OpenFN. It is fully open source, top to bottom. And the big changes that have been made from the product that you all may have used on openfn.org is that it sort of trims down the user experience into these key sort of visual workflow builder and work order audit interface. So allowing less technical users to actually build out specific workflows with all of the branching logic and all of the complexity of the multi-step workflows that you were used to in OpenFN v1, and then providing a cleaner interface for essentially guaranteeing the successful completion of these various workflow executions. It's totally open source. Anybody can pick it up and put it anywhere they want around the world. So we wanted to think a little bit about, how Thailand is approaching this upcoming fork in the road. They could continue running on OpenFn as a SaaS. They could run OpenFn entirely locally, or they could go with a sort of managed local deployment, which is kind of OpenFn's response to this hybrid model that Rob was discussing. There are a lot of considerations here, but I want to keep us moving along quickly. So I was actually hoping to go back to Nino and ask, sort of with your security hat on, your years of experience as a white hat hacker, what would you be thinking about if you were thinking about sort of, am I using a SaaS? Am I using a hybrid model? Am I using a sort of fully DIY local deployment model? What are some of the things that would come up for you as a security expert?
Well, first thing, you have to remember that you are responsible, whether you like it or not. I know you sign different terms.
Wait, who's you? Who's you there?
The owner of that's the implementer, whoever is using the system. In this case, Thailand. It could be any X country that is trying to use OpenFn or any other softwares. Whether it is going to be cloud, hybrid, or on-prem, you have certain level of responsibilities. We have talked about how, for example, Global Goods OpenFn. In this case, you guys have done your part, but then at the end, if I buy the best firewall in the world, pay, I don't know, $200,000 for it, but the username is called admin and the password is 12345, what do you expect from this firewall to achieve? But there are some steps that we could follow, so hopefully it will give us a better security. Although the maximum security is achievable. I know some of you guys are thinking, how about switching off and going back to the cave? No, I'm not talking about this type of, not using the technology, but we can actually achieve a lot of security. You have to have a risk management inside your organization. Doesn't matter if it is on the product you're using is somewhere in the clouds or hybrid, or it is on your prem. Secure configuration. I've talked about this firewall, your wireless.
Yep.
People are constantly nowadays working from home, mobile technology, your mobile data management softwares that you are going to use. Do you have a plan for your incidents? How would you manage an incident? I mean, we all panic. I mean, I give you that after almost 18 years in cybersecurity. I still panic, but then after panic, what are you going to do next? How do we do malware prevention? I mean, especially nowadays with ransomware and how brutal they can be. My best advice will be 3-2-1 rules of backup. Let me just quickly copy paste something for everybody in the chat, and hopefully that will clarify what this 3-2-1 rule for backup is. That will be your best friend, and you will thank yourself when you have done a proper backup. Whether it's a malware, ransomware, whether your data is compromised somehow, you can always revert back to it. Managing user privileges. Insider threat is the most difficult type that we have to deal with. External, we know everybody is trying to attack us, but internally, this is where by managing the privilege of user, who is accessing what and who is going where, is going to be very crucial. And how do you achieve that? By constantly monitoring your network, by constantly monitoring files and workstations. Network has to be secure. Check removable medias, control them. The most important part of this whole entire ecosystem is called meatware. Sorry to call humans meatware, but believe it or not, in cybersecurity world, this is what they call us. And that's why number 10, user education and awareness is going to be one of the most crucial parts that you need to pay attention. Now, before I hand it over back to Taylor, I'm going to ask everybody a question. If you have the black hat of a hacker, and you are targeting an organization, which group you're going to attack within that organization? You can select whatever group you want, from HR to IT to C-section management to your average John, Jill, Joe, and have a reason for it. I know we will have 15 minutes of Q&A, but hopefully that will trigger your mind and you will say why often you would see one group is targeted, because there is a strong reason for that. Taylor, it is all back to you, buddy.
Okay, I love that. So when we open Q&A, I want to hear someone at least volunteer who they're gonna attack if they're trying to hack an organization.
Indeed.
Okay, this is fantastic. So we're just about at the Q&A now. We want to think about, and this, Rob, Alexa, and this is fantastic. It's a really, it's an interesting set of questions that you all are facing at UNICEF, at Primero, the Thai MOPH is facing. We want to think a little bit about what this means for the broader global goods community. First of all, it's incredibly exciting, Nino, that you're sort of on the team and thinking about security at Digital Square full time. What I want to put out there is that it's not enough for us as global goods providers to simply build secure open source software, because deployment is everything. And the argument that I think I'm trying to make for the rest of the global goods community is we really need to provide software delivery options. And this could be as sort of simple as high quality maintenance and support by SSH and sort of developing networks of tried, trusted IT professionals that can support global goods deployments, or it could be much more sophisticated. It could be hosting options and hybrid models like Rob's done at UNICEF Primero. But if we're providing securely designed and built software, but we're not also providing the options to host or deploy that software securely, even without a big IT security budget, even without a DevOps team that's trained in all of these 10 principles that Nino was walking us through, then I don't think we're actually giving these ministry and NGO partners the substantive freedom to run secure global goods. I think we're saying, sure, we've built the software in a really nice and secure way. You're free to use it however you'd like because it's open source. And I don't think that's good enough. I think actually we need to focus more on this software delivery as a service. We're global goods, it's still free and open source software, but that's not enough. We need to think about how that software gets delivered and deployed. And I think it's on us to make sure there are high quality options for hosting, deploying, and supporting our global goods. Rob, Alexa, I'd love to hear from both of you how you think that sort of the lessons learned from a Thailand style implementation might apply to the broader global goods community. Do you have any thoughts or any input on this?
I think just to add to what you said, beyond just deployment and maintenance and hosting, I think from the implementation point of view, a big learning has been like really help the partners that you're working with to implement, do it in a secure way. Because when we develop products, when we develop global goods, there are a lot of decisions that we make to try to implement security by design of that product with sensible defaults, all sorts of features. But it's another thing to make sure that the folks that are implementing your product really fully understand the implications of those different configuration decisions, of how to leverage those features properly to meet their requirements. So that's something that we spend a lot of time thinking about, and also working with the MOPH and UNICEF teams on is really walking them through all of those different feature options and just saying, like, okay, if you want this is what it means. This is how it complies, does not comply. Are you sure you want that? And I think by really setting folks up with that implementation security specific guidance as well, it just helps to responsibly hand it off. And then I think the other thing that was interesting about this implementation is, in the beginning, we heard from the MOPH is like, yes, we definitely want local deployment. And my head almost went to the, okay, do it yourself kind of mode. But I think that a lot of partners that we work with, really are looking for that support, that engagement, that consultation, and getting to the reason why there's that desire for the local deployment, I think can really help to define the right deployment, the right support model, and just making sure that we're first, really upholding the requirement and not just taking kind of what someone thinks will satisfy that requirement as at face value.
That's brilliant. And Rob, can I get you on here one more time? Is there any? So you've done. There's 60 plus countries now using Primero. Is there anything that sort of you're seeing from the software delivery as a service, or on-prem versus cloud versus hybrid stuff in the child protection space that you think would be useful for this global goods community to consider?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think my insight on this would be that we work increasingly directly with governments on implementations that they intend to scale nationally. And so in the actual process of pitching, right, of sort of trying to advocate for in my case, a child rights-based approach to this type of work,
sure,
and really framing it as a rights issue and a protection issue. We often find ourselves in this little bit of a delicate dance between sort of trying to assess the capacity of a national team to actually do what we're sort of telling them is required to do this locally. And how do you do that? It's a very tricky conversation, because you certainly don't want to give the impression that you're evaluating their capacity, or that you're going to give them a grade at the end, and if they pass, they get to use the tool. It's a constant process of educating. It's a constant process of us improving our practice and our documentation, making things like we've learned a lot from you guys, distilling these experiences into accessible, reusable flows and tools that for the next place we go, we have just a little bit better refined checklist, and just a little bit, a little bit more carefully designed training to sort of assess things in advance and invest a little bit of time and energy in making sure that, things like security are being appropriately planned for, resourced. Those are the kind of things it's the human part. And I also have to shout out to Alexa, because in this implementation in Thailand, it wasn't just like a bit of BA work and some field mapping and stuff. She basically unpacked their whole child protection system for them in a way that allowed them to see where those automations, where those investments were going to make a difference. And I think those are amazing skills that we as a community have to offer, and that's a real part of the value add that we have when we're implementing these tools. We're educating to some extent on this.
That's fantastic. Thank you. All right, so we're a little bit over time. We've still got 7 minutes till the top of the hour. Obviously, you can learn more about OpenFn and Primero and Digital Square by going to our websites. But are there any questions, or Linda, Maria? How should we engage? Oh, we certainly have. We need a response to Nino's question, at least. But do you want to take it over, Linda?
Yeah, absolutely. Please, anyone who's got an answer to that very interesting question.
Don't be shy, team. Take one group.
Yeah, so just to remind everyone, so this is who within the organization, who do you think is going to be the people to try and hack? You're going to be the easiest targets.
Yeah, don't take my first question out of context, please. Philippe, yes.
Thanks, Taylor. So Nino, I think based on a recent study that was reading the other day, I think what's interesting is that the techies from big tech companies are actually the primary target for social engineering, because they seem to be falling for all kind of phishing and different attacks. So even though it wouldn't come to mind, techies seem to be the ones that actually love tech and click on all the links that you're going to send them. So that would be my guess.
Any other takers here? That is a good answer. You're 100% spot on here. Absolutely. IT is always the target. And the reason, as you mentioned, that the techie element that we want to investigate, but beside that, the lazy IT, I've been there. I mean, as guilty as I am, when we can bypass our own policies, whether it is internally we are in charge, whether it is somewhere in cloud, That's why you have to have a shadow IT system. Could be in form of an audit every 6 months, every year that you will do. It's not just we don't trust IT or whoever is in charge. It's just you have to remember sometimes we go AWOC, we go crazy, say, well, I have all the powers out there. I could just do whatever it is that I want to do with the system. Thank you so much, Phil, for that.
That's super interesting. So, are there any other questions or comments from the group?
Okay, Phil again, would you like to ask your question?
Sure. I think it's more towards Robert and Taylor. I feel like there's a couple of key messages that you've put out there. One is about making sure that we educate internally all of our users, all of our stakeholders and partners around the, all of the things to consider. And I was just wondering, what has it taken for you to actually work with the Ministry of Health to say, like, make sure that security is actually being considered, and how did they operationalize it? Because a lot of the time they don't consider the operational cost of all of this. And they think, oh yeah, we're secure at the time of deployment or implementation, and then that's it. But that's not the reality. I mean, security is an ongoing process. So I wanted to find out from you, like, what did it take, or how is it going to make sure that they are operationalizing this as well? Over.
I mean, Robert, I don't know if it may not be, the document itself may not be shareable publicly, but I was incredibly impressed by sort of the almost requirements that you have for implementing government partners, right? When you're going to do a Primero implementation, you're sort of saying to them, look, we have child protection as our mandate. We will not compromise on this. So can you show us that you're actually doing X, Y, and Z things? I know this is a tricky bit, but can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. You can never have enough time or enough resources to do this really well. And it's always been a concern of UNICEF and the engineers behind this product that, having these local deployments, we are sacrificing a little bit. Like we're much more confident in the security of our SaaS offering, right? But as we go through this and we learn more and we see where these weaknesses are, we're building these into our process. There's a document that I just linked there, and there's a specific, we call it tier 4. And in the tier 4 documentation there, we've actually sort of curated content that's like, how do you know that your servers are properly hardened? And how do you know? And it's really accessible. And it's something that we're constantly going back to and updating, developing sort of guidelines and FAQs to really make it, not like, here's the manual, read through this, best of luck, that we're engaging, that we're involved. We certainly notice when things go wrong, and we have to, invest more in that, in the observability in that hybrid model. But it's an ongoing issue, and a lot of it is about educating. It's about saying, this is going to continue to cost money. This is going to continue to be your concern in perpetuity. Plan for it. There are trade-offs. So this is one of the more challenging pieces for sure.
Yeah. I mean, from our perspective, Alexa will tell you that one of the most useful things that we do with partners is sort of walk through a total cost of ownership matrix, where we aren't shy about the fact that whether or not they're sort of going on their own or using a SaaS or doing something in between, there will be ongoing costs to making sure that they're implementing securely. And it's really good to have security conversations in terms of budgets and in terms of percentages of FTEs that are actually responsible for this stuff. That we were at the Primero annual meeting last week, 2 weeks ago, and someone raised the question, how much money are we spending every month to secure that child's data? And this sort of like flipped it around for me, because I'm suddenly thinking, oh gosh, this isn't this isn't sort of like a big cost center. This is rather an investment that the organization is making on an ongoing basis. They're saying, I want to spend $5 every month to secure that child's data. No, I want to spend $6. I want to spend, so it is a bit of a attitude shift towards security. And then the last thing I want to add is within our own organization at OpenFn, we've learned a ton in the last 18 months, and doing the UNICEF audit was a really big step for us. One of the things that we've tried to hold on to most is this understanding of security as being about an organization's posture. So you're actually creating a culture of security. You're creating a security posture within that organization. And it's as simple as little things like celebrating vulnerability detections on Slack, making sure that the first person to make noise about something they suspect or see or smell, that they get a big shout out, big kudos. And then also, we have like a monthly meeting where the entire organization comes together for 30 minutes and talks about every single thing that happened related to OpenFn and security in the last 30 days. And it's a standing monthly meeting for literally the entire staff of the organization. And if it gets a bit quiet, fine, that's fantastic. Usually though, stuff comes up, and it's a great opportunity to realign the entire organization on secure first, and then stable and scalable. So yeah, that's my thoughts on how to actually get it done in practice.
Right. Okay. I think unfortunately we have actually now run up against the hour, and I do see there was another question, but Alexa has answered that. So it just leaves it to me to hand back to Maria just to wrap everything up for us. But thank you so much to all of our presenters. That was an excellent session. Really, really interesting.
Yes, agreed completely. I was very enthralled by the discussion here today, and it was very wonderful to hear so much from all of our presenters. For everyone else who has joined this session, and the recording and the slides will be available on our wiki, and we'll be sending out that link shortly. So if you want to watch it again or share it out with your colleagues, please feel free. And thank you again so much, Taylor, Alexa, and Rob, for your wonderful, wonderful insights here today. And for everyone who's attending GDHF, we will be seeing you there.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks
Bye.
so much. See you soon. Thanks, Nino. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Alexa. Thanks, Linda.
Bye.
Thanks,
Great.
everyone.
See you.
Bye,
Kylie,
Alexa.
see you
Bye.
soon.
Bye.
Hi, Brenda.
See you next week.
Hi, Pavel. Oh my goodness, look at all these great people here. Look at this.